I'm a feminist, but today I'm talking to Corinne Low about her brilliant book, Feminomics. And I was listening to it on 1.5 speed on my Audible app, just because, I need to get through a lot of books to do this podcast. And so I was listening to the book and thinking, oh, this is interesting, this is really interesting. And then I heard, is it you reading it or someone else reading it?
I read the intro and then someone else reads the rest.
And I heard the reader refer to hey girl psychologists. And I thought, oh, hey girl psychologists, is that something off TikTok or something? I thought, I've been left back. Did I miss this earlier in the book? Did she talk about hey girl psychologist? And I thought, sounds a bit girl boss for me. I don't like the sound of a hey girl psychologist, but maybe it's a new wave sweeping the globe, and I'm the only feminist in the world who doesn't know about hey girl psychologists. So I went to the Kindle and I searched for the section behavioral psychologists. Of course it wasn't a hey girl psychologist. What did I think? Hey girl psychologist. What did I think that this credible author was writing about? Hey girl, I'm a psychologist. I was so embarrassed, but it was so funny. The first thing I did when I met Corinne was told her. Corinne, do you have an I'm a feminist but?
I'm a feminist, but even though I'm married to a woman, I've explained to her that when it comes to driving and lifting heavy things, I'm a lady.
And I'm a feminist, but when I read about how much better it was to be in a same-sex relationship in the book, I did vaguely think about, could I trade my husband in? It feels like a trade-up. But then I remembered he does all the cooking, and in a relationship with a woman, I would feel, oh, this is all going to be equal. I can't ask him to do it. Wouldn't be able to ask her to do anything. The same way when I go to the airport and the Uber driver or the taxi driver is a man, I'm like, yeah, you can lift my really heavy suitcase in. When it's a woman, I'm like, oh no, I'm going to have to do this myself. And obviously, I want more female taxi drivers if that's what women want to do, but just not for me. And I feel like they should have a lifter that comes with them, and men should have to take turns like jury duty to go in the front seat when it's a female taxi driver so they get to lift suitcase. I think that men would be very happy to do it. Any men in tonight? There are men in tonight. Just give us a cheer if you're a man. Hey. Would you be happy to do a bit of jury duty suitcase lifting? No.
For feminism, for equality.
They're happy to do almost nothing for feminism. Do you know what men do for feminism, Corinne? They say, I'm a feminist. And we go, oh my God, thank you. The bar is so low. So damn low.
That's why I say in the book that every man is gonna say, of course your career is just as important as mine, baby. And I say, ask, if I had a job offer in another city where I got a 50% pay increase, but you would have to look for new work, would we move, okay? That's the real question, is when push comes to shove, what happens?
But if they're horny, they'll say yes. And then 5 years later, when you have a child and a huge career break at the same time, they'll be like, I didn't say yes. Or if I did, it's because I wanted to get laid. Men in the audience, I suspect the men in the audience who've come to Feminomics are probably the good ones, which is why there are so few of you.
Like this one in the front here, who I just learned was Deborah's husband, so yes.
He came up to sort of do some admin, and Corinne said, is this your producer? And I said, it is. And then I explained how Tom does the cooking and all the bill-paying admin. To be fair, he could have a horrible online gambling problem. I would never know. And also, I don't do it much. I think I'm buck that trend. I really, really do buck that trend. I do things. Like, he wouldn't give a fuck about us having curtains of any sort.
No, they don't.
Literally, there could be towels pinned to the thing. He'd be like, fine. He'd be like, absolutely fine. And so sometimes I'm like, this cushion, what do you think? And he's like, we've got cushions. But our flat is really lovely. It's a really peaceful, beautiful environment because I've invested in that. So it turns out women do more than men, even when they don't do much. Live from the Archers in London, the Spontaneity Shop presents The Guilty Feminist with me, Deborah Frances-White, and my very special guest, Corinne Low, talking about money and feminism. Thank you so very much. All right, so today we've got a very exciting book. Now, I've devoured this book, and it actually doesn't matter whether you are currently on the apps looking for somebody, that you might actually be able to live with for, a big chunk of your life, maybe have a child with, or whether you're in what this author calls the squeeze, which is the period between 30 and 40, where your career's just taking off, but you're also breastfeeding. Or whether you're like, fuck all of that, I want to be the CEO. This book, unbelievably, covers all of those things. And it's all about how women can navigate the challenges that the world throws up, that it denies it throws up. The challenges which we're told, that's not a thing anymore. There isn't sexual harassment. In fact, if anything, women are favored in the workplace now. It's hard for a white man to get a job. And also, men do half the housework now. You're imagining it that he doesn't. You're imagining it. You are paid just as much. There's no equality gap there at all. Everything that you wanted, you've got. If you're not happy now, I can only think that's on you. This book was such an eye-opener, and it gave me I think, an arsenal of ideas and facts, studies, analysis, facts, but also ideas on how to combat this, and just different paradigms for thinking about things. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you tonight Feminomics, what data tells us about women's lives and how to get the most out of yours, and to welcome to the stage the very talented, brilliant, and I've discovered backstage, charming, Corinne Low.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. Now, Corinne, it talks a lot about how, women have been sold this lie that they can have it all, and we're constantly being told, if you can either have it all, you can't have it all, you should have it all, you're not doing it right if you don't have it all. I will say, like all brilliant authors, when I got backstage, I discovered she had beautiful, beachy, blow-waved hair, while pumping breast milk, just to be clear, and also was in a gorgeous ensemble and was, flicking through her brand new hit book. And I was like, in a museum that's got a Versace exhibition on, and I went, seems a lot like you are having it all, Corinne, despite what you've said.
It's a facade. It's a facade. The other day, the breast milk leaked in my work bag, and now my laptop has half of the screen blacked out. So yes, it's much less glamorous than it looks.
We are all so relieved and delighted to hear that. Sorry about your laptop. We feel for you as well, but we do need to know this, because your hair's so good. Corinne, before we begin to get into the meat and potatoes, or if you're vegan, the tofu and tofu, would you read something from the book to give people the tone, and to, if you haven't read the book or you haven't read Corinne before and you just want to know what this is about, could we have a small introduction from you?
Thank you. So I'm going to read from a chapter called Working Like a Girl. I'm naming names here. Okay. My first day at McKinsey happened to fall on the day of their annual Women's Summit, and so I and the other female new hires were invited to join the event. They had brought in a gender empowerment speaker who mostly seemed focused on addressing the mistakes women made in the workplace. I'm not knocking McKinsey here. This speaker was highly in demand at the time. She went around the room critiquing body language, urging us not to sit with our legs tucked under our bodies like little girls, and imploring us to stop phrasing everything as a question and quit apologizing so much. As she spoke about the idea of power dressing, she singled out another new hire, Steph, whom I had just met, but with whom I had already felt an instant connection. Unlike so many of the other new hires who were trying desperately to fit in, Steph seemed comfortable being herself, and I found her to be a breath of fresh air. The speaker asked Steph to stand up so the whole room could inspect her. She was dressed in a white button-down and pink khakis that looked J.Crew catalog effortless. The speaker practically gasped at the sight. "You can't wear pink pants. No one will take you seriously, she admonished Steph in front of hundreds of her new colleagues. And your hair should be pulled back, off your face. Steph, who'd previously seemed unflappable to me, was clearly shocked and embarrassed. We sat in silence as the speaker went on to describe the fundamentals of a power business wardrobe and how women could be treated the same as men if only we changed our behavior enough. We all got the message that day, and it wasn't one of empowerment. It was that we couldn't bring our full selves to work. I wonder how different that experience would have been if we'd been told, like I tell my students, that being yourself at work can be your superpower, and that if people won't take you seriously for wearing pink pants, they're the problem, not you. Wait, you're wondering, don't women need to change? I thought the gender wage gap was because women do more non-promotable tasks, negotiate less, are more risk-averse, and aren't competitive enough. Research indeed underscores that women show differences in multiple traits compared to men in a variety of settings, and we'll get to that in a moment. But none of the literature has demonstrated that the traits women exhibit more than men are actually bad from a profit or productivity perspective. So now I'll flip ahead a little bit to what does the evidence say? One classic example of how men's and women's traits may differ in ways that impact the workplace is that women tend to be less competitive than men. I have no trouble believing this, given the documented effects of testosterone, but for a long time there was no actual evidence linking being male to increased competition in professional settings. Two experimental economists, Muriel Niederle and Lisa Vesterland, changed this. Niederle and Vesterland ran an experiment in which they asked men and women to choose how they wanted to be paid for completing a task in the lab. In economics, it's a room with computers where people, often undergrads, do experiments for pay. For adding up a series of two-digit numbers, participants could be paid via a piece rate, a set sum of each problem they did, or a winner-takes-all competition. Naturally, if you're a high performer, the potential reward from the tournament-style payment is higher. But if you don't think of yourself as a top performer, you're likely to be better off getting paid for each problem you get right. Men and women are equally good at these simple math problems and thus face the same trade-offs between the compensation schemes. But men are drastically more likely to select the competitive payment scheme than are women. This is true even for women who are in the top group of performance, meaning they are likely to win the competition, and thus they lose out on earnings by forgoing the tournament. A male colleague mused to me that maybe these results mean it's efficient for there to be fewer women in competitive industries like finance. But here's the important piece too many people are missing. The canonical paper is titled, "Do Women Shy Away from Competition? Do Men Compete Too Much?" And the authors have told me people always forget about that second part of their results. They find that the majority of men in the bottom performance group also choose the competition scheme, even when they would make way more money by simply getting paid the piece rate. In fact, among the lowest performing men who are certain to lose, 60% choose the tournament. 60% of the lowest performing men are like, I've got this, okay? I might want to give the women who were the highest performers but chose the piece rate a little pep talk, sure. But if I'm a manager, they're not the people I need to be concerned about. I'm much more worried about the men who, having completely flubbed the task, still thought, this is gonna be awesome. Why don't we spend as much time speculating that male over-competitiveness might be destroying corporate value as we do asking women to change and be more cutthroat? I think about the quote by Christine Lagarde that if it was Lehman Sisters instead of Lehman Brothers, perhaps there wouldn't have been so much over-indexing on high-risk mortgage securities and the financial crisis wouldn't have been as bad. My own research shows a similar phenomenon, we're almost there, guys, in another area where women are often taken to task for not performing as well as men, negotiation. I had heard the refrain that women's poor negotiation skills were a key part of the gender wage gap so often that I assumed there must be some evidence for it. However, when I looked at the literature, the empirical research supporting this idea was surprisingly thin. So I ran my own experiment with my grad student, Jenny Huang. We paid study participants to come to our lab and participate in a scenario where they negotiated with a random partner over a $20 reward. The catch was there were only two possible splits: $15 for one person and $5 for the other, or vice versa. If a pair couldn't agree on one of those two unequal divisions, they would both get zero. Because one's negotiating partner was random, men and women could each be paired with the same gender or opposite. Each pair negotiated through computer interface and then individually entered their share of the split. Naturally, a variety of fierce and creative bargaining ensued, from ultimatums to guilt trips. In the end, we found that men and women on average did equally well when they negotiated against one another, poking a hole in the theory that men were naturally more skilled negotiators. But overall, women received more money on average. Why? While women also performed just fine negotiating against other women, when men faced other men, they were substantially more likely to fail to reach an agreement at all, leaving them with a payoff of 0. How much more likely? 250%. The effect was specifically driven by men who knew they were negotiating against other men. We randomly assigned whether gender was revealed to the other player or not. A man knowing he was bargaining with another man seemed to trigger some unproductive stick measuring. Something as basic as saying hi and trying to establish rapport with the other player was linked to higher payoffs, but we found men were less inclined to take this kind of friendly approach against other men. Instead, they were more likely to offer ultimatums, such as, I'm taking the $15, so if you don't press $5 for yourself, you'll get nothing, and I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Unfortunately, such ultimatums to another man were often met by one right back in return. No, I'm taking the $15 and not talking about it anymore. And subsequently mismatching. All those $0 payoffs added up and meant male-male pairs earned 20% less than any other pair type. As long as there was a woman at the negotiation table, cooler heads seemed to prevail and some kind of an agreement was reached in almost all cases. Our experiment showed that women were not only weren't worse at negotiation than men, but also that they were better at making sure some kind of mutually beneficial deal was struck, rather than being so rigid that no one ended up with anything. In a professional setting, the cost of such negotiation breakdowns could be enormous. Imagine, for example, the cost of ending a long-term contract or partnership, and possibly much larger than a failure to get slightly better terms in an agreement. But despite this evidence, I've never once heard of corporate seminars for men instructing them on how to negotiate more like women. In situations where women do accept less at the negotiation table, the possibility remains they're tiptoeing around other people's expectations. I'll skip ahead a little bit. All this research offers evidence that women aren't any less skilled at negotiating than men, and when they choose not to negotiate, it might be a function of skillfully navigating difficult situations where they know they may not be treated equally. In fact, research by Andreas Lebrant and John List shows that when women are explicitly told that a salary is negotiable, they negotiate just as much as men. What holds women back from negotiating more proactively is lacking assurance that they won't be penalized for negotiating, not the skill or the will. So let's get out of the mindset of telling women they need to change the way they approach work and start talking about the unique value women bring to the table, how to make sure they're recognized for it, and what systematically needs to change for us to stop preaching that nice girls don't get the corner office and instead start building a world where they do.
So is that insight that neither man will compromise the reason we have so many wars?
I would speculate, yes. That
inability. If a man negotiates with a woman or two women negotiate, they're more likely to reach some kind of agreement where everyone gets something.
Yeah.
But if it's two men, it's like, no, I'd rather have nothing than see you have anything.
Yeah, and it's so important to look at the data because again, we've all been told, who here has heard, oh, you need to learn how to negotiate more like a man, you need to be tougher at the negotiating table, women don't ask, they don't bargain enough. And that's not actually what the data says, right? It actually shows in my experiment that women got more because actually getting an agreement, getting a piece of a bigger pie is more important than arguing over the scraps and maybe getting nothing. But we never say to men hey, let's have a corporate seminar where you learn from women about all these skills you need to bring to the table. We assume men are normative and that's what we should be aspiring to.
I think that's really true, and I think if you advertised a course in a big bank in the city, men negotiate more like women, no one would come. No one would come because that is not understood. You'd have to really show the data, but even then, would they be like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. Even the way training is offered to men and women in the financial district or law, I really noticed this because I've done a lot of that kind of stuff over the years. I do kind of something between a stand-up show and a TED talk in the corporate world on various things. And this is what I noticed, that this is how training is offered to women. So we've noticed you're not really confident enough. We'd like you to go on a confidence course. Immediately, I'm like, well, that's counterproductive. You could send someone on an IT course, but as soon as you come up and go, you know what, you need to be more confident, you fucked it. That person is immediately like, am I not confident enough? No, we'd like you to go to a hotel in Stoke-on-Trent with 12 other underconfident people and see if by the end of the day you can come back almost as good as a man. And do you know how this is how men are offered training? It's the Top Gun method. You're the best of the best. We're going to make you better. And they're like, men have said to me when I used to work more in that world, they're like, I know I'm being considered for senior management because they're sending me on a training course. Whereas women would always go, they're investing in me, but women would always go,
something's wrong with me.
It was presented to them as if it was something remedial. And so this is a really interesting insight.
And no one has ever sent men for a humility course, right? But the data shows that might actually be really valuable.
I mean, I think fairly clearly no one's done that. I think that's absolutely obvious. The piece around negotiating, women negotiating, was interesting because there's a possibility women are penalized for negotiating. We say women don't negotiate. Often, well, we don't say that, but often that is that's
said to us.
Yes, received wisdom is women don't negotiate enough. But is it true that sometimes if they negotiate, like when they're graduates, straight out of university, you're meant to negotiate for your first salary? If they do, they're just slapped down, get back in your box.
Yeah, exactly. That was the part I skipped because I was going on too long. But there is a study showing that if you kind of take this lean-in approach and you take the women who don't negotiate and you force them to negotiate, they end up getting less. Because they were skillfully navigating people's expectations, and they recognized negotiation wasn't going to be well received. And so when they're not negotiating, they're responding to that expectation. And so yes, that's something we need to change. Like, we need to train male managers to be like, here's how not to be, taken aback if your female junior employee negotiates. But we always focus on training women. We always focus on the problem is the woman, that she's the one who isn't doing enough, and never on the system that might produce those behaviors.
It's really, really interesting. Is that something that women here have experienced? Has anyone here experienced trying to negotiate and being looked at like you've asked for more, like you're Oliver with a bowl of gruel? I feel like that does happen to women, and then they're told, well, you should have negotiated straight out of uni, otherwise this is why you're behind. And it's like, I think it's because men often see young men as, he reminds me of myself when I was young. He's negotiating right out the bat. Give this kid what he's asking for. Where it's a woman, it's like, you're lucky to be here. And it's all unconscious. I don't think it's necessarily, well, maybe it's not all unconscious for everyone, but I think overall, it's systemic, as you say. It's like, who does she think she is? She looks like a girl, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I want to get into maybe we should go in terms of this audience. How many of this audience are still at the stage of thinking, or you might never want to do this, but how many of the audience are at the stage where you're thinking it would be nice to meet somebody, and it's really hard to meet somebody, their hands are going up very fast. It would be nice to meet somebody. Okay, how many are in the squeeze, which is what Corinne calls 30 to 40, trying to manage home and career? Great, okay. So more people in the squeeze, but enough people, I think, that we should talk about how to, if you're just swiping right, in vain, going, and then maybe you hope to meet someone in a bar, but now unfortunately they're on their phone swiping right to someone in another bar. So it's much more difficult to meet someone in real life, everybody tells me. But if you are a young person, let's start with that, because that's at the beginning of life. Or you might not be very young, but you might just be on your second relationship, or you never met the right person.
You might be a divorcee, back to swiping right like I was. So I think I say that we interview for the wrong position, that we interview for the position of boyfriend, when what we need is actually a co-CEO of the household. And it's like, what determines our happiness when we're shopping for a partner is not the same as what's going to determine our happiness later in life when we enter into the squeeze, when we've got 2 kids and 2 careers, or just the 2 careers, and we're really trying to juggle that, right? So I think we need to think ahead and think about what's going to contribute to my happiness, what traits in a partner are going to contribute to my happiness and support me as my life changes, because we change over time, right? And so it goes from like, what type of movies do you like? And what's your favorite band? Because that's what we're doing together. We want to know if we have that in common. That's how we're spending our time, to like, we're spending our time really differently. And now I need to know, like, what do you like to cook for dinner? Who's your dentist? When was the last time you put in a load of laundry? And like, where do you order your furniture, right? So we should ask some of those questions earlier on, right? So I recommend asking, like, interviewing for the position of co-CEO by really finding out if you have shared values and shared expertise. Because in the real world, we don't let people apply for jobs without actually a CV to demonstrate their skills. So if he has like a plain white box of an apartment if he brings his dirty laundry home to his mom's house on the weekends, right? And if he only ever orders takeaway, like he's not demonstrating the expertise for the position that you're hiring for.
What number date would you raise this? Because I think it shouldn't be number 1. I think if it's on the first date, that might be slightly off-putting. At what point does it go from, because you talk about, what's the turn of phrase you use about it's like hot brain and cold brain?
Hot state versus cold state.
Hot state, cold state. Can you please deconstruct that a bit?
Yeah. So I talk about how irrational we can be in love, right? Because everyone's probably familiar with behavioral economics. It's this study that shows that like the way we need to make decisions in the modern world, our brains that evolved in like life or death situations in the savannah are like ill-suited for making decisions in the modern world, right? So it's why like if you've ever found yourself like agonizing or feeling really stressed out over a small financial decision, but then you have like a really important financial decision and you're kind of like, oh, whatever, I didn't invest in my 401k. And like that's actually like way more sorry, I don't know if it's a 401k in the UK.
We know what that means.
Okay,
it's
in
like
your retirement savings account or whatever, right? You like have a bigger financial decision, you actually take less care with it than like for me, like spending 25 minutes figuring out what else I can add to my cart so I get free shipping, so I don't get charged the $2.99, right? That's behavioral economics. That's because our brains treat everything as like a life or death decision. We have no sense of proportion, okay? We never talk about it for women, for the decisions that particularly affect women. And when you think about it, it's so important because in the savannah where our brains evolved, caring was life or death. When we're thinking about our genes surviving to the next generation, and that's what our brains evolved to do, is carry our genes forward, it's caring for our offspring, caring for our partner so they care for us, caring for our community so they share food with us during a famine, right? But now, whether or not like everybody really likes us, whether or not we're like the world's best PTA volunteer, is not gonna determine whether you make it through the winter. But your genes still feel like it does, right? So that's why it feels so devastating. Somebody else's disappointment feels life or death because actually that was important for survival. And nobody talks about that, about behavioral economics for women and how it impacts us. And so I think about that with love. Finding a partner to attach yourself to and pouring love into that partner was literally how your genes got fed, right? The genes that have evolved and have been with you for millions of years, that's how they got fed, right? But that's not how you get fed today. That's not what's gonna determine life or death. So you actually have to take yourself out of that hot state of the chemical feelings that are telling you like, yes, attach yourself to somebody because he's gonna kill an ox for you. And like, that's gonna make you survive, right? You've gotta kind of tune that out because your happiness, what's important to you now is not life or death survival, right? It is happiness, self-actualization, and fulfillment. And for that, you need to select for other things. Not the strong, handsome man who's gonna kill the ox for you, right? But someone who's actually gonna do the laundry, somebody who's gonna carry his fair share, someone who's gonna be as invested in your career, and your genes are like, a career, what the fuck is that? They did not evolve with a career, right? So someone who's gonna be as invested in your career as he is invested in his own, right? So that's where the hot state is like the chemical feelings. It's love, it's attraction, it's all of that. And I'm not saying that all of that is not fun and it's not joyful and we shouldn't like also embrace that, but like nothing kills love and attraction faster than you not being supported at home, okay? The hottest man, when you are putting in a load of his dirty laundry or cleaning his toothpaste off of the sink, okay, is no longer sexy, I promise you. So we have to be able to kind of separate ourselves from that hot state that says, this is what I want, right? This is what's appealing to me, and tune into that other deeper part of us that's like, actually, there's a whole arc of our lives, and that's, you know, what I need over that is going to be different, and attraction is going to fade, right? But, you know, somebody changing the toilet roll is forever.
And on that, you have this incredible insight in the book that if one person, and I've got to get this turn of phrase right, you talk about being in the market, and that means your career outside the house. In the house, you call home production. So if you're working at home, home production, if you're out in the market, if you have a couple and that couple is raising children, the one who's in the market more tends to do less home production than the one who's home production, like fewer chores basically than the one that's home more or all the time. That is true if you are any couple except a heterosexual couple where the woman is in the market. So if you are a heterosexual couple and the man is in the market more and the woman is in home production, she will do a lot more at home. If it's a lesbian couple, whichever one is at home will do the jobs at home. Gay male couple, same. But if the woman is doing the most, being the breadwinner, can you talk us through the stats on this and prepare yourselves for horror?
Yeah, it is
Strap in.
absolutely shocking. So a female breadwinner does twice as much cooking and cleaning as her lower earning male partner. And it doesn't change no matter how much more she earns than him. It's completely flat. So if you go from he earns 80% of the household income, you might look at it and you might be like, yeah, that's fair. He does less of the cooking and the cleaning. He earns 80% of the household income, right? But now I start moving it. Now he earns 60%, same amount. He earns 40%, same amount. If he earns 20% of the household income, he does the same amount of cooking and cleaning as the guy who earns 80%. His role does not change at home at all because men have one gender identity. It's like, I'm gonna go kill the ox, I'm gonna go, earn a paycheck, and that's it, I'm done, right?
But what if they don't kill the ox, though?
Yeah, and so that's right. So they're just chasing the ox, and I literally see that. I see couples in the data where she earns, and these are, because people always have excuses, so they tell me, no, it's because men's jobs are inflexible, whereas women's jobs are flexible. That's why, right? But I say, I have, in my data, I can restrict it to couples who are both hourly paid, so they both are paid just a wage for however many hours they work. In the US, the modal couple who does this, it's like she's a nurse and he's like a truck driver or an Uber driver or something like that, right? When she earns per hour 4 times as much as him, right, she's still doing more than double the housework, the cooking and cleaning, and he works more hours than her. So her wage is 4 times higher, but he works more hours. So even if he's not killing the ox, he's still chasing it because men are stuck in these outdated gender roles, right? They have not evolved and updated to this new world where it's not anymore about brute strength and killing the ox. It's typing on my keyboard and actually my lady fingers are just as good at that as your man muscles, right? And they haven't evolved to this new world where women can take on both of these roles, but men are still only doing one role, even when they're not producing as much as her. And so then it creates this phenomenon that I call winning the bread and baking it too, which is what a lot of women end up doing, and that ends up breeding a lot of resentment. And so I think for both men and women, actually finding new gender roles and adapting to this new reality is going to make us happier. It's going to create happier relationships.
And there's a study that you look at that says that men have basically not changed. So women have had a revolution, and the stats on men, they've worked 40 hours a week as a trend, obviously. This is wild, we're all talking about trends here. But men have done the same amount of housework since the 50s, and most men have worked 40 hours a week in the market. But women have changed massively. So they're now out in the market, and there's labor-saving devices, and so there's, But in that time, since the 50s, apparently not one man has stacked one more dishwasher in the history of the world. That has remained constant.
If you see, the graph is in the book, and it is absolutely shocking when you see it because you see women's time, you see the gender revolution for women, right? You see women entering the market, their time in market work go up, and you see because they take on these sort of labor-saving, it's the dishwasher, vacuum cleaner, washer, dryers, their time doing housework goes down, right? And then it kind of levels out because we're done with that technology revolution at home. Now the stuff that we're doing, a machine can't do for us, right? But men, it's just flat. So they just work the same amount of hours, historically, and then they do the same amount of housework. They haven't changed at all. So what we feel like is a gender revolution has actually only been a gender revolution for women. and we left men behind. We left them back in the 1950s, right? And if we are going to like survive, like as a species, literally, like to be able to continue to reproduce with one another, we need that second part of the gender revolution. We need men to come along for the ride that we have been on, right? And to actually evolve.
And it doesn't really look like it's going that way. There's so many now manosphere conventions and terrible podcasts going, oh, women need to get back into the kitchen and men need to kill more oxen.
Yeah.
That seems to be a terrible trend. Do you think there's something to do with the ego? We were talking in the dressing room about how there was a seminar that I went to where they asked how many women it was like in the financial district in London, were the breadwinners, and 70% of the women stood up. And we said, why aren't we talking about this? And that was in one particular room, and it was in a particular industry, and so on and so on. It was an event for women in business, and so on. So I'm not saying it is 70%, but it was, you know, these were high-earning women, and they were like, and they said, why aren't we talking about it more? And so many women spoke up and said, if I get a bigger bonus than my husband, I have to pretend that didn't happen, and he gets really sad. If he gets a big bonus, he wants to open champagne, we take the kids out for dinner. But if I get a big bonus, I pretend I didn't, because it's upsetting for him. Or I have to pretend that one woman told me that her husband had a sort of hobby job, and it was costing her money.
Yeah.
Because he was investing in stuff, and she said, but he couldn't just say, I look after the children.
Right.
I at dinner parties. She said, he can't admit that. So I had to sit him down and say, as long as it doesn't cost me money, you can do whatever, but I can't spend half my bonus on your job, in inverted commas. And these things we're not really talking about, which is the ego, which is sort of not their fault because they've been trained to think, kill the ox, kill the ox.
No, and that's right. And I think when I see that, I actually feel tremendous empathy for men, right? Because I think they're very lost. They've been sort of displaced by this gender revolution. It's like you can liken it to when a country opens up to trade, and now you find out that like China can make your iPhones cheaper, and so like everybody making iPhones, you know, domestically is now out of a job, right? And so is this like the economy changed to where women are equally competitive in the market, right? But men didn't get new gender roles, new role models, new ambitions, right? Literally an ambition to say, oh, you know, pulling my weight at home and being this type of dad, that could be an ambition, that could be fulfillment and self-actualization. So I think that is going to be the next phase, is like I liken it to, people talk about the stages of grief, and I think we're in like the denial and anger stage, right? Where men are like, they don't want to have sex with me. Maybe I can just control them, and then they won't have a choice, right? And we can move on from that, right, into some acceptance, right, of that things actually have changed and that there's other ways for men to be successful. That it is okay to be successful, not by, having this individual accomplishment where you're the one who's killing the ox, but by actually like supporting your wife and actually like taking care of the house and being an amazing dad, right? So we need to have those other possibilities for like male self-actualization and fulfillment. And I think that is a huge predictor of success of a relationship. So whether you are shopping for that co-CEO of the household, or whether you are trying to promote your low-level junior employee at home to be the co-CEO of the household, I think really thinking about it as fulfillment and finding somebody who can view it as like, this is actually part of the integrated purpose of my life, is having this complete whole life. Like, we never talk about men having it all, right? We never talk about that. We're just like, we don't have this whole big, like angst about like, are men gonna have it all? But I think,
but that's because often they do. Like they do that.
Yeah, because they have a woman doing the rest of it for them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I see it in comedy. When a woman has a baby, everyone goes, "Oh, she probably won't want to come out at night. I'm not going to offer her this gig." When men have a baby, I have seen men who all they've done is smoke dope and do 3 comedy gigs a week. Quite poorly, go, I've got a mouth to feed now. I've got to be on Mock the Week and QI. And their career takes off because they start getting really ambitious. And their reaction to a baby is, I better make some money. My career better go somewhere now. And a woman's reaction to a baby is often decided for them by the industry, which goes, I don't think she'll really want to be doing comedy in the evenings.
Yeah.
You know, how do we get around that?
And I see there that legacy of our genes, right? Of saying, again, for our survival, when you had a baby, he had to go out and hunt, right? And she had to nurture and stay home. And those were the survival strategies. And what I'm gonna say is, like, nobody is evolutionarily adapted to work at Goldman Sachs, right? That's not what our genes are trained for. It turns out actually both of us can do it, right? We all need to be escaping that evolutionary destiny, right? To find a new destiny, which is actually integrated fulfillment. And I have that same message to women, because I think women have been given this lean in message that your career is your singular objective in life, and that should be how you measure your success. And I would say that your happiness is how you should measure your success, right? And I say in the book,
one person there is applauding happiness. Everyone else is like, everyone else
like,
says, I want it all. One person's going happiness. The rest are going, this is London. We know we're not going to be happy. We live in London. What we want is possibilities and everything.
No, and I think we've been trained to substitute material goods for happiness. That you say, well, if I can't sleep and be happy and have time with my family, at least I'm gonna have stuff. At least I'm gonna have a nice apartment, and I'm gonna have a nice handbag, and I'm gonna drive a nice car, right? And that is the objective of capitalism. That is not your objective in life. That is not your purpose in life. So I say in the book that your job, we should think of our job as a technology to turn our time into money. It's a machine that you put time into and you get money out of. And that's because it's your machine. You should be asking whether it works for you, not just asking how you should work for it.
Can I engage with something around the biological driver of the nurturing the baby versus the ox slayer? When I was writing my book, The Guilty Feminist, what I discovered when I read a lot of anthropology was we really evolved on the savannah, living in packs. And actually, men and women both did the same amount of work and the same amount of child rearing. Of course, you're right. When you have a baby on your breast, you know, you've got to do that. However, the gatherers would go out together and gather, and of course there'd be give and take if someone has a baby, but the gatherers would gather, the hunters would hunt, and the children pretty early on would have to go with them. And so everybody, they think from when records began with anthropologists studying nomadic people, everyone worked about 40 hours, and children were co-raised. So children would go to either parent, and also were kind of raised by, you know, the whole, I don't like using the word tribe, but the whole community would raise the children. I think that's why we do have this drive to do more. I think if we were programmed to just suckle babies and men were only programmed for ox slaying, I don't think it would be the same. I think it was the beginning of agriculture, actually.
Yeah.
Because then it was like, once you could stay still, you weren't nomadic anymore, well, we might as well have a shelter. And, well, if I'm, you know, out ploughing, then you might as well look after the babies in the house. And then everything in the house became property, that including the wife and the child. So I think the invention of the plough really screwed us over.
No, I mean, I talk about this in the book, that actually it's a little bit of a myth that we had this specialization throughout history where women did domestic and men did, you know, market work, because actually that was like at its peak in sort of like the 1950s. It was actually like a unique moment where there was this kind of housewife model. But before that, there was so much work to be done just to survive that actually everybody had to pitch in, right?
Well, I think your book debunked my bit, which was agriculture meant the women had to look after the children away from the plough. Because you said, actually,
if you look at time use data, women who were working on farms or women who were living on farms work 60-hour work weeks. They are doing 60 hours of work on the farm.
And so actually it was this blip that what you've pointed out, it was this blip in the 50s, really, in the middle of the 20s, because very rich women, obviously, it was basically rich white women in the 50s, got fridges and dishwashers, and then it became this sort of almost economic status symbol that they could stay home while Don Draper went into the city, banged a lot of chicks, made up slogans for stockings, came back. I say bang chicks, ironically, you understand. Came, that's what he would say, I wouldn't say that. He came, and then he would come back in, and then she would be really miserable and on Prozac or whatever they had at the time. And that was a very short period, and women kind of fought to get back out into the workplace.
Yeah.
And also, there was only ever rich women that could do that.
Right. It's a very specific, like, kind of
Small
model in
number of
time, but we
people.
have that as, and we sort of hold that up as, you know, this halcyon period, right? And then the other thing, and the reason we don't do that anymore, is it was a tremendously risky position for those women to be in. So we see this movement, this like trad wife movement, to kind of return to those days and to say, oh, this was so great because women were so relaxed. Really, they were all very depressed and alcoholics, or, you know, on Prozac, as you said. But that was supported by a legal framework that actually has since changed. So in both the UK and the US, now anybody can walk away from a marriage. And so if one person invests in public goods, the home and the children, and the other person is investing in a private good, his career, the biggest asset formed in a marriage is the man's career, the man's human capital, right? And he gets to walk out the door with that. And so I think there's a lot of this younger generation that I fear are being—
They don't know that.
They're being set up for something really scary that the housewives of the 50s and 60s learned, because then the 70s came and a lot of those women ended up divorced and starting over at a minimum wage job in their 40s, you know? And so I always say, you know, to women that I don't think there's anything wrong with investing in children. The book really embraces a more holistic definition of success, that if you love being a mother and you want to invest in children, you want to invest in home production, those things are tremendously important. They're vital. They are economic production, but you have to always think, what happens if something changes? Because you will not be protected by the legal system. You need to be protected by your own planning and your own choices. And that, you know, it could be divorce, but it also could be like your spouse could die or become disabled, right? Like, we need to have our own earning power.
Yes, and the trad wives that I've seen going, don't waste money on college, you'll only be in debt, be in subjection to your husband, you don't need your own form of income. I'm like, that is encouraging young women to walk into economic dependence, and that is very different from the co-CEOs going, do you know what, your job is paying more and I want to be with the kids, and that is a very different thing from deliberately handing over the economic keys to the kingdom, because then they can trap you there abusively.
Yes, and let me also call out the bullshit, because the women who are selling you that image, right? Why do they care about their follower count? Because followers are revenue. They are monetizing this image of financial dependence. It's like, no, this is total BS, right? They are pursuing a career that is telling you not to have a career. What?
Yeah, it's really poisonous. You talk about our sort of like where we put our time and what we hire someone else to do. And you said something that I've never thought of before, which is if you have a job that pays enough that you could hire somebody to help you with things that you feel are just thrown at you because you're the woman one in the relationship, or the other one in the relationship. You mean you tell a story in this about leaving your husband or breaking up with your husband and then having a relationship with a woman. Actually, let's just go down that avenue for a bit. How different was that for you? Do you talk about that?
Well, I want
Personally?
to talk, let me close the loop on outsourcing, because I do think this is so important, that like what I say is that if you're not outsourcing something, you are hiring yourself to do it, right? And I think as women, if I name outsourcing stuff, you're gonna immediately feel like you're gonna feel something. If I say like, hiring a meal service or a chef service that makes meals, hiring a cleaning service, a professional organizer, you know, having somebody else do the shopping for you, you immediately feel like, oh, that's like very bougie and out of my price range, and like that's, you know, maybe if I was really wealthy. But how many people here change their own oil in your car? Does anybody change their own oil in their car in this room? You do, good for you. Actually, anybody can do it. Anybody can watch a YouTube video and change their own oil, but we just don't think twice about outsourcing, changing your oil, paying a mechanic, you know, 70 pounds.
Having your gutters cleared.
Having your gutters cleared. fixing the roof or fixing the plumbing, all things we could do if we placed zero value on men's time. Then, we could send the man up to the roof and say, you spent 6 hours wrestling with fixing the roof, right? But we don't, because we think men's time has value. But spending $70 on a mechanic to change our oil seems completely natural. You don't think that could be a completely modest income family that does that. But if I say pay $70 to a professional organizer, you're like, oh, okay, somebody is hoity-toity, right? So I think we need to treat women's time like it has value, right? And recognize that it comes at an opportunity cost to us, where there's actually something else we could do with that time. And what else we could do in that time down the line might actually make us more money. Because if we were able to invest that time into our career, right, if we're in school, it's into law school or grad school. If we are, on the partner track, it's like getting that extra time to lean in at work, right? Those actually might pay off for us. But as women, we don't even realize how much we've internalized the messages that we should just seamlessly be able to do this all and magically make it happen, right, ourselves, because we are still measuring ourselves against that 1950s housewife, even though the realities of our time and our day have changed completely.
That was something I'd never heard before, which is if it is a stereotypically male job, like clearing out the gutters, in the 1950s, if Don Draper would do it rather than Betty Draper, in our mind, it's okay to pay for it. But if it's something a woman would do in the 1950s, we think, who do I think I am? And listen, we're talking from a high level of privilege here of anyone who can afford anything, especially in this cost of living. And you do talk about the economic morality problem of, one thing you pointed out, Corinne, which I thought was really interesting, is talking about women hiring cleaners. The cleaners are referred to as workers, but they are usually also women. So there's this sort of rich white woman can have a cleaner, but who is that cleaner? That cleaner is a woman working for, a low hourly rate. So you talk about the ethics of that, the morality problem of that, and the way that we can address those things to become more moral people. And at the moment, we're in a society where if you have the kind of job that someone might refer to as a career rather than a job, it's not saying go and get a nanny, go and get a cleaner. It's saying rethink our assumptions on your own time and how you spend your time. Even within, you talk about like people saying what they do to relax, that people talk about scrolling or online gambling now. And can you speak a little bit about that and how you think about that, about paying yourself first? I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just yes to everything you said. And it's like women take all of this guilt on ourselves. And like I don't hear men, again, as, torn about saying like, oh, but am I just paying like a low wage man to change my oil, right? Again, it's something that we take on as women. And I think it's a discussion that we need to have as a society. I want a more equitable society for everybody. But again, I want women to kind of place value on their time. And so one of the ways you do that is by paying yourself first with leisure time, okay? So what does that mean? I tell this story in the book, and it's the story that there's two stories that people always refer to of being like, oh my God, I couldn't believe that. And one of them is, I meet this couple, and the wife tells me, I'm so stressed out. Life is so hard with 2 little kids at home. I haven't gone running in 4 years since my son was born. And I was like, that's interesting, because I just talked to your husband, and he told me that work-life balance is so important that he goes for a swim every day for an hour because it's really good for his mental and physical health. So that is one of the biggest inequalities in the household, is inequality in leisure time, right? Is that men get time to pursue their own interests, their physical health, to care for themselves, to be with their mates, to play a sport, right? And that women don't. And so what I recommend doing is, because the goal of your life, the objective of your life is happiness, and we make happiness through our time. So I want you to mark that out on your calendar and put your leisure time first. And not let if it was a meeting with your boss, you wouldn't let anything else claim that time. Because if we leave ourselves the time crumbles in the bottom of the cookie bag, then the biscuit bag, sorry, I'm in England, then, we will end up just scrolling on our phone, right? But if you actually put it first, you're going to do something meaningful with that time. You're going to do something juicy with that time. And I want us to reframe it, because why is it more productive to spend an hour working so that then I can buy something that brings me happiness, versus to spend that hour directly making happiness and meaning for myself? So the next time you are taking leisure time, I want your mantra to be, I am being so productive right now.
How do you do that when you're in the squeeze, though? Because there's a lot of women here going, leisure time, lol. And like, when you've got children coming at you and emails, but how do you get the headspace to do that? Is it that if you have a partner, and this might lead us back to your story,
Yes.
is it that you have a partner that you say, I need to spend this hour, you need to take the strain?
Yeah,
here?
you let it sort itself out the same way men often announce, like, okay, I'm going to the gym, or I'm going for a run, or I'm going for a cycle, and they let it sort itself out, right? So, there's this great story that I will leave anonymous, but somebody on my publishing team told me where, she said, like, I used to try to get everything done at home and all my chores before I would go to the gym or go for a run, and then I would run out of time and I just wouldn't do it. But I started paying myself first with leisure time after I read the book. And what I found is that not only if I did this after I went to the gym, then I would get everything done in less time because I kind of had this natural deadline. But by that time, my partner would be home to help me, because it turned out he'd been paying himself first with leisure time the whole time, right? So yes, one of the answers is to marry a woman, which is what I did. It's a practical, relatable solution for you. But I do think that, everybody here knows that, like, when you have a deadline, you suddenly get the work done like an hour before the deadline. I do think it's sometimes, if you treat it as a priority, you will sort the other things out, but we're not trained to treat that as a priority. We're trained to think of that as indulgent, right? And I want you to think of it as sacred. I want you to think of it as productive. I want you to think of it as recharging and refueling yourself, and in fact, the purpose of your life. And for moms here who feel that guilt of, like, I can't say no to my kids, or I need to do this thing, I can't put myself first, right? You're not doing them any favors by letting yourself become an empty shell. For me, the biggest cure for my mom guilt was that I saw, once I got divorced and I moved from a 2.5-hour commute to a 7-minute commute, I saw the relationship with my son blossom when I was getting my needs met. Because what he needed more than anything was for me to be okay, for me to be able to be present with him. So one, that's an incentive. And then two, if you're raising boys and you're asking, well, how do I raise this next generation to be different? Taking care of yourself is actually it. Because if you say, I am gonna fill all the gaps in this family with my own mental and physical well-being, you are modeling for them that it's okay for them to expect that of their wives in the future, right? If mom always comes last, you are showing them that those regressive gender roles are okay, right? So you are paving the way for gender equality by going for a run, okay?
Now, soon we're going to have a break, and then after the break, I'm going to throw the questions over to you. So during the break, start thinking about those questions. To round off this half, are there any other favorite insights that you have? Anything that you came to say tonight, Corinne, that you haven't got to say, that you think, I always love telling them this?
I think for people who are parents or who want to become parents, for me, the game-changing stat that really changed the way I looked at my life was seeing in the data that moms today spend twice as much time with our kids as mothers a generation ago, because I felt like I was failing. I felt like I was like, oh my gosh, why can't I do this? Why do I think this is so hard when, like, women have been doing this, they've been, and we are playing a different game. When we talk about having it all, what it all is has actually changed. And some of that is for a really important reason, that, we actually understand child development differently than they did in the 70s and 80s. So like in the 1980s, if your kid was at daycare, it was perfectly acceptable to have 30 kids in one room, each in their own, cot, and you kind of hand them a bottle assembly line style, right? And now we have science telling us that no, your baby needs to be held, and you have to talk to them, you have to speak 10,000 words a day, and you have to sit on the floor with your toddler doing enriching activities instead of putting them in front of the television, right? So it's a beautiful affirmative choice to give our kids something different, and it's tremendously costly in terms of our time. So to me, seeing that data really gave me permission to think about how I wanted to invest my time and where I was getting the return from it, where I felt like, yes, that is connection, that is development for my child, and where was it like guilt that I had some narrative about what it meant to be a good mom that was like, oh, the homemade baby food and the hand-decorated birthday cupcakes or whatever, right? That I needed to let go of, because being a super 80s career woman and being like an Instagrammable trad wife are two separate full-time jobs that do not add up in one 24-hour day, right? So knowing the data empowers you to find, what do I want to do? Where do I get the returns for my time? And I mean that at home. I also mean that at work, to say, what are the tasks that actually contribute to my career advancement, that help me upgrade my money machine so that I can put less time in and get more money out, versus what is the stuff that I've guilted myself into doing because I have this model of what it means to be successful.
So it's really stepping back from the whole unregulated capitalist model and saying, what does my happy life look like? Which you suggest that we do. You talk about, there's a negotiating tactic that you talk about. You say if anyone's done a negotiating course, you have to look at the reasons behind.
The interests behind your positions. So in
Interests behind your
negotiation, you often go in and you say like, well, I want 70% or whatever, right? You have a position that you're staking out. And in negotiation, you're trained to say, what are the interests behind it? What are you hoping to achieve by that, right? And so to map out your happy life, I think we all need to break down our own kind of like image, because a lot of times it's like, well, I want my kids to grow up in this house in the suburbs with a big garden where they can play and be happy, and it's this idyllic childhood. And then I hear from women where they're like, actually my 90-minute commute is like killing my soul, and by the time I get home, I'm so depleted that I'm snapping at the kids and I'm angry. Well, that's not how to give them the idyllic childhood, actually, right? So if you dig deeper and you say, what am I trying to achieve here? There might be a different way to achieve that than this sort of image of success that we have. And the same thing when women say to me like, well, I need to make partner, or I need to hit this career milestone, or I have to do this. And I say, why? What are you trying to accomplish? How is it going to make your life better, right? Is it that you're going to get paid more money? And what do you want to buy with that money? What's important to you? What security are you trying to achieve? Or is it that this is just a marker of success that you have in your mind that means this is how I know I made it? This is how I know that I'm good enough, right? That we need to tune out and tune into, what do I actually want and need in my life? Because we will forever be unhappy if we're comparing ourselves to somebody else who has more. Somebody else will always have, better dressed children, a more well-appointed house, a more accomplished career. They will always have that, right? Because they are maximizing their utility function. That's the economics term for what you want in life, what gives you happiness, and you are maximizing yours. You cannot compare yourself to somebody else, because only you know what you value, what brings you happiness, what brings you meaning and fulfillment, right? So we have to practice tuning in to ourselves so that we can actually achieve happiness rather than achieving accomplishment or success for its own sake.
Corinne Low, everybody.
Thank you.
Shall we have some questions from the audience? Who would like to ask a question? There's people there.
He's in charge. He has the microphone.
Oh, he's in charge. Okay. We hand this decision-making over to the patriarchy, apparently.
Is that working?
It's working, yeah.
Firstly, I just want to say thank you both. Honestly, really enjoyed the talk, and I feel so energized, so I stand up.
Great.
I don't know, I feel, Corinne, you keep saying, I think the key message from today is like, women should always chase like happiness and always like prioritize happiness in our life. But I don't know why, I just can't stop thinking, shouldn't we have that by default? Why is that not happening? I almost feel a bit sad that it's like surely part of us feel like, yes, we should have that, we should do that. But why we're not doing it? And I just can't stop thinking, do you think men, they just know how to love themselves like more than we do. And why?
Sorry. Men are not happy. Men are fucking miserable. Sorry. Corinne, this question's for you.
But I do think that men are trained to think of the objective of their lives as themselves, right? It's like, obviously, I am doing me. I am self-actualizing. Of course, that's what I'm here on earth to do, clearly, right? And I think as women, we are trained to kind of take care of everybody else and have ourselves sometimes be like the last priority. So like one of the things I say to women, especially if you're moms, is to say like, you are a member of the household. So like if something's not working for you, it's not working for the family. Like you are actually a member of the household, right? And the fact that that's radical, right, is just shocking because like I don't think any man has ever forgotten that like he was a member of the household and his own, needs mattered.
I think that's true. I think that self-centeredness is absolutely true, but I don't think men are very good as a group. There may be happy men in the world, but as a group, I think that, that meme about men would rather invade Greenland than go to therapy. Yeah. I don't think men are happy, but also I do question the idea that we should have happiness by default. I think we are in a generation now where we're like, we expect happiness. And I think, when people say, I just want to be happy, I'm like, that's the hardest thing ever to be happy. The human condition is all about how we can't be happy. Even when we have everything we want, we find something to be miserable about. Finding happiness I think it's about being in some kind of meditative state, about being content with what we have, and we're always striving for more. I don't think being happy is easy. I think moments of joy and pleasure are easy, but being long-term happy, I think, is it's a lifelong pursuit. And I do think I'm now more worried about finding connection, having a purpose. I think if I focus on those things, I will have a certain amount of happiness in my life. Striving for happiness, it's counterproductive. You're always like, where is it? Where's the happiness? Not happy enough. I think strive for connection and purpose, and to make the world a better place, even if it's just for the people you love. Which in economics terms, I say in the book, it's what your utility function is, that your utility function is this deeper, richer, a lifetime of joy and meaning and connection. And, you should think about maximizing that, right? Even if it doesn't always feel, happy in the moment, but you're serving your values. So. Yeah, a lot of life is just cleaning up toast crumbs, to be honest.
Next question's at the back here on the right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think definitely we need the continuation of the gender revolution, but I'm worried about the backlash against this, and it seems to be louder and more profound and coming from younger and younger men who are somehow being convinced that the fact that women are now more allowed to do what we want is bad for them. So how do we convince the men of the world that actually this might be good for them as well, and stop this crazy, misogynist, awful backlash that is brewing everywhere?
That's why I think the displaced worker analogy is really helpful, right? Because if you think about workers who've been displaced by trade coming in and now, they suddenly are like, oh, now I have to compete with China for my jobs, right? They are angry, right? The first thing they do is get angry. And they're like, we got to vote out all the politicians. We need to do Brexit, right? And, I think if we have that analogy in mind, right, we can see that as like a natural response to a loss of privilege and control. And we can kind of, like our toddlers throwing a tantrum, right? When we like set a limit and they're like throwing a fit and we're like, okay, I hear you. You really wanted the blue cup. The blue cup isn't available right now, Do you want the red cup or do you want the yellow cup, right? So I think that we need to channel that to a more productive place about, okay, that the old world is not coming back. What is available? And have a little bit of that empathy, right? And make space for those big feelings, right? But channel it into productive change and moving forward instead of backwards.
And this isn't my Q&A, so I'm not going to say anything else except to say I'm starting something called the Road to Gilead, Because in my book, Six Conversations, I'm talking about how the Christian nationalist far right, and this isn't really anything to do with Christianity, it's to do with the Christian nationalist, they have been investing in this country to try and get that same dynamic going through all of these different means. It's very strategic, it's on purpose, and it's in chapters 1 and 3 of my book. And I'm starting a sort of grassroots movement called the Road to Gilead, which is about the move from this element to come up with ideas in our communities to fight it. If you'd like to be involved in that, go to guiltyfeminist.com, sign up to our mailing list, and there'll be some events announced where you can get involved in community outreach, and even some things you can zoom into, you know, do as much or as little as you like, but I do think we have to fight it very hard. More questions?
Yep, just there.
I think my question is actually an extension of what we're talking about on the last question, but it's more focused on females. So, you know, I believe more women voted for Trump than they did Kamala Harris. So how do we encourage more women to be on this journey with us?
I will say, again, I will respond with kind of some empathy, right, of this, because we are in this moment of this kind of like seductive trad wife movement, right? And I think the empathy that I will offer is to say that I do think the lean in movement did not make space for the multiplicity of women's desires and women who said like, no, but I love being a mom and that's really meaningful to me and that's not just an inconvenience on the road to my actual purpose in life, my career, right? They felt alienated by that. So I think making space for women to show up however they show up in our movement, right? And making space for women to say like that they really love being a mother and they don't necessarily care if that means they're gonna earn less. I think they have to be our allies too. So I will say that that's one thing. And I think everybody romanticizes the past until you find out what the past was actually like. I don't know the laws in the UK here, but like in the US, like women couldn't have a credit card until like the late 1970s, right? Like,
it was the same.
yeah,
Same.
so just, you know, this idea that like, oh, in the past, you know, we just got to relax all the time. It's like, no, we had no economic or social freedom to determine our own destinies, to chart our own course in life, to leave an abusive marriage, you know? So I think that reality of also what that past really looks like for women, I feel like unfortunately some people are trying to find out the hard way. That's what Gilead, you know, means. And, you know, I hope that we can educate people, you know, instead of needing to find out the hard way.
And I'm going to say again, Road to Gilead, we're trying to educate exactly this. Conjugal rape was legal to the 90s. Women weren't allowed in pubs in this country. They weren't allowed in pubs. Like, women don't know that. And I feel like if we need to educate what it was like and what taking away women in leadership positions, and you know, we need people to know, and we're going to have to do a big multi-pronged campaign because the far right are amazing at this. They've got Andrew Tate, they've got trad wives. Now, on the face of it, they're enemies. Trad wives are all about respect me. I'm, you know, one man, blah 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 blah. Andrew Tate's a horrendous piece of shit. But they don't fight each other. They don't take each other down. On the left, you said a word slightly wrong. Someone was telling me about that they told off this homeless person got told off for saying they were homeless. They were like, no, you're unhoused. I'm like, they've been getting strategic over the last decade or so. They've really got strategic. Well, we've spent the last 10 years telling each other off for saying spirit animal. We've got to get strategic and we've got to get organized. Sorry, but we just have to, because otherwise we are going to lose everything.
Hi, thank you. You both have a beautiful dynamic on stage. My question is, I can't recall the exact stats, but I've heard that there's going to be a great wealth transfer, which is going to benefit women. So for the first time in history, women will have more economic power than men. And do you have any predictions for what that could look like?
Corinne, women are going to...
I don't know exactly what stat that's coming from, because if
I
you
think
add
it's
up...
something to do with only the ultra high net worth and inheritance then moving towards women. But just what do we think that would, how will that affect? Like if some of the most rich people in the world will be women.
Is this stat about there are going to be more female millionaires?
Yes, I
quite
think that's
soon?
it, yeah.
Nowhere near as many female billionaires as male billionaires, but there's going to be about the same millionaires, male and female.
Because of inheritances, basically. Is that the...
No,
like,
I think it's also because women have invested and got into...
Yeah.
Women have made their own businesses, built their own businesses. They're amazing entrepreneurs.
But I think if you look in the data, men still control more wealth, the vast majority of wealth, and men still, on average, earn higher salaries and are in more positions of power, both political power and economic power in terms of CEOs. Like the gender gap is actually closing much less at the top of the distribution. It's closing much more at the bottom of the distribution because women go to college more and they work in healthcare, which is a growing sector. The gender gap at the bottom of the distribution is growing, but actually at the top, men still control the vast majority of sort of economic power. And so I guess I would say that I think that's a little bit of a fantasy, and I think we need to, therefore, I don't think we can substitute economic power and buying power for rights, for political rights.
Yes.
You know, it cannot be that rights come via dollars that you are able to invest to buy them. So I think that...
Thank you.
Hands over here.
Hi. So I loved exams growing up because I come across quite ditzy, and exams were sort of a quantitative way of proving what I could do. And I think women often tend to do better in exams in GCSEs and university, and then the exams go. And I guess my question to you is, do we try and continue on with those, and I know there's a lot of problems with exams, but trying to carry on with those more quantitative measures of potential to go some way at addressing all the biases that women face in the workplace? So should we carry on with exams?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, because it is true. It's actually objective, right? And, you know, I think so much of the evaluation that we do is subjective. And it's like, well, he really seems like he knows what he's talking about. It's like, oh, he seems like he knows what he's talking about. Great then, right? Let's hand over the reins of the company to him. And there's actually this startup investor, Paul Graham, who's this very famous startup investor who like owns Y Combinator, this startup incubator. And he said, I can get fooled by anyone who looks like Mark Zuckerberg, right? He's like, every bad investment I've made, it was some guy in, you know, the hoodie and jeans and the sneakers who looked the look, because that's who I think looks like a good entrepreneur. And it's like, oh, meritocracy, am I right? So absolutely, I do think the more we introduce objective standards, you know, then we get rid of those subjective, you know, biases. Vibes are biased. If you just feel like somebody is competent because they are, you know, giving you this, you know, strong heterosexual male energy, right? That is bias talking, and I think we do need to tune that out. So I do encourage firms to use objective metrics in hiring.
Vibes are biased. What a good T-shirt.
We fought really hard many, many years ago to get things changed. A lot of things changed, but in my lifetime, I haven't seen enough change. And I'm worried that I'll drop off my perch before things actually do get better. So what can we do to help the younger women to get more angry, to get more vocal, and to show up a bit more for those bits of change that we need before somebody takes it all off us?
I mean, I think it is what it said. It's like so many young women didn't necessarily grow up with those same restrictions. We're too far away from it, right? And so, you know, I see that with the whole question of women working, is that my generation, we saw our mothers get screwed over in divorces, right? And so we saw like, oh, I need to be able to protect myself. There's a paper I cite in the book that's called Degrees Are Forever, okay? You know what's forever? Degrees, not your diamonds. And so I think we saw that, right? And this younger generation that's coming up, right, they didn't see that happen. And so they've kind of maybe invented this fantasy land where like, I can, you know, have a man who's gonna work and then I just get to do whatever I want and I get to go to fitness classes and the spa all day, right? And it's like, that is completely a fantasy world. And so I think it is your generation banding together in those organizing spaces and helping this, up and coming generation to see that they have to own their own power. Nobody is going to give it to them.
Absolutely.
You have quoted a lot of very powerful statistics about women this evening, and we have also alluded to privilege this evening. I am really interested to hear, if you were addressing a room full of mothers of 4 living below the poverty line, would your message be the same? And if not, what would you add?
Yes, such an important question, and it was something that I did think about a lot when I was writing my book, because I grew up below the poverty line, and so I never took for granted that I was going to have, sort of any of these things that, I think are taken for granted in a lot of the feminist sphere. And so, when you think about like who Lean In is written for, it's very much written for like a woman who's climbing the corporate ladder, right? And so one of the things I talk about in my book is that, because I do a lot of work in developing countries, and in Western feminism, we have this idea that like work is empowerment, like, right? That female empowerment means like being an equal in the labor force, right? And when I talk to women in developing countries, I do work in Zambia and Kenya and India, and they're like, no, freedom from work would be empowerment. Like not having to do backbreaking labor and leave my children behind, and actually being able to care for my children, that would be a sacred privilege, right? So it really reframes kind of how we think of things that, we've kind of been conditioned to think of, motherhood is like this an inconvenience that kind of stands in the way of what should be our real objective in life. And so I think the book makes space for like all of those different stories and all of those different needs, and like families that are living paycheck to paycheck. What does it look like? And I try not to be trite, again, even though I suggest talking about outsourcing, but I talk about it because I say, look, even fairly low income households do still pay for the oil change, right? That is still actually something that they pay for, and so we should think about it. But for families that really say like, look, I can't solve this problem with money, that's not how this problem is going to get solved, I do try to offer other solutions, and a lot of them actually come down to community support. How can we better rely on the resources we have within one another? If you can't outsource, one of my favorite games to play is I'll clean your house. So you get together with a girlfriend, you go over to her house and you clean up while you have a glass of wine and your kids play, because play dates are childcare, okay? And it's so much easier to clean up someone else's mess. And then she comes over to your house the next night, and it's like whatever project you've been dreading and you haven't been able to get to, and you're like, oh my God, it feels so hard to do it. When it's somebody else's project, you have none of the angst about their mess, because their mess does not make you feel like a failure. And so like you whiz through it. And so there are other solutions like that I suggest about how to rely on our community support to get what we need, and to understand that like we're not supposed to be an island, and remove some of the guilt and shame from us feeling like we can't all do it alone.
So I think probably we've got time for 2 more questions. We're going to take one from online. This one is from Lorna. And she wants to know, how do we use data to bring men into the gender revolution? There's a disparity between genders where women are creating many of their own communities of support and men are creating very few of them or not for themselves. Is there an opportunity being missed there by feminist allies to teach, change and move forward? Is it too late for adult men? Will they listen to factual data or deny it?
Well, Feminomics makes a great Christmas present for the men in your lives. So yes, I will say one of the most gratifying pieces of writing this book is that I have had wonderful conversations with men whose eyes were really opened by some of the things that I say in the book. And, I think like every time I present my data on how much more housework women do, every man in the room is somehow an exception to my statistics, everyone. And I will take the positive spin on it, which is that what that tells me is that the intention is there, that they actually want to do half, right? But they just aren't realizing how much work there is to be done. It's an iceberg, right? They see the tip of the iceberg, what's beneath the surface, and we're doing all the invisible labor of the iceberg underneath. And so I do think that there are a lot of men who want to step up and want to do better, and I hope that this book also helps empower them with some of the facts.
Any other
One
questions?
more question, yeah.
There's one more hand. I can't see
Yes.
any other hands, so I think probably... Oh, no, there is another hand there. Maybe we could do speed questions, speed round.
So I work in technology, and I was wondering how you guys feel AI is going to impact women in particular, especially with things like career gaps on CV means they're taken out of the sort of job market because of that scenario, and then also things like facts and fiction, which are being put into the ether, that are then being recalled as fact to individuals. And I just wanted to understand your impact on that, or thoughts.
Oh, I hate it so much. I hate it so much. I feel like I read a post the other day from someone saying it's stripping our humanity. It's like, you don't have to grieve. We're going to make some videos of your mum. So it's like you're talking to her. Human beings need to grieve. You don't need to read a story to your child. The AI will. You don't need to make up a story for your child. The AI will. You don't have to write this awkward email to someone. No, these are things human beings need to do. It develops our character. It's what life is. What do we think we're doing? This is so dangerous. It's programmed by programmers who themselves haven't been to therapy and are lacking in empathy. I'll do anything to stop it. I hate it. I'm aware I'm Generation X, and maybe if I was really young, I'd be like, yay, a new thing. I'm not, I can't, maybe I've just hit the wall with new things. I don't know, but I really do think it's evil, terrifying, violent, and it's going to ruin the world. What do you think?
I think every time we have a really big technological shift, the first thing is that everybody's like, oh my God, it's amazing, it can do everything. And then a lot of those companies go bankrupt, and then we scale way back to the useful stuff that it can actually do, okay? And so I think that's where we are, we're in the AI, like, oh my God, it has so much potential, it's gonna do everything. And then we're gonna be like, no, it can do like 10% of things, and actually you need human beings for everything else, right? And so we're still in that phase of like figuring out where does this actually fit, and where do human beings actually fit. And so I think for women, because you asked about career breaks, and I think that's so important, right? It is thinking about what are my durable and transferable skills, okay? So how do I invest in durable and transferable skills? And if you are on a career break because you are investing in your family needs to be investing in you. So can you get a certificate while you're on that break, right? So that your skills are current, even if that costs money, because you are investing in the family, right? So I think just all of us need to be prepared for our jobs to evolve and saying, what are the things I'm learning? And one of those things, remarkably, is communication. Communication, being able to work with other people, communicate with other people, make people feel something, be human, is going to be a very scarce skill in this era that we're entering into. And I think it's something that women excel at.
And can we take that very final one, and we promise we'll answer in one sentence.
You got one more.
Sorry, hopefully I'll make it quick. I know you made a joke about, getting feedback about being confident in the workplace. But I mean, how do you as a woman, rather than, kind of get that feedback from men, oh, you should be more confident, you have imposter syndrome. How do you encourage women to be more confident in the workplace and kind of more confident in their negotiation skills? Because I think that that's kind of crucial and really important, but I guess it's just hard to demonstrate.
Yeah, so I, in the book, distinguish between skills and traits. I think we often tell women to change their traits, to act like a man, to like, oh, you're not, confident enough, or you ask too many questions, you're too apologetic, change that. And I try to focus on skills, to say like, hey, let's strengthen your negotiation skills, right? Let's work on strengthening your communication skills. Let's prepare for this situation. So I just don't want us to send the message to young women that they need to change, because nothing is more confidence busting than that. And that's why I opened with that anecdote of going to my first day at the job and us all being told we needed to change. Well, of course, that took our confidence right out of us, right? Because we were told that we didn't belong there as ourselves. And so I think that's a very damaging message that we send to young women. And as I said, some things that look like underconfidence could be strategic caution and could be something that's actually a really important skill to bring to the table that some men need to bring to the table too. So I think nurturing and developing skills, but not telling women to change their traits or to try to act like men.
And also, you know how good you are. Don't go around telling the story, oh, I just had a thought, I don't know if it was worth mentioning. That's a story. Tell the story. I've got something to say. I think this is really good. You should listen to me. No one else is going to override your story. But that is a learned behavior, and it can be, it can be useful in some situations. In other situations, just take it off like a coat. And don't be frightened to learn it. One thing I really quickly wanted to say is one of the questions about what can we do next. I've got some Guilty Feminist shows coming up where I'm going to do some Road to Gilead stuff. If you go to guiltyfeminist.com live shows, there's a few in November. There's only, Tom, I noticed that only the Pleasance ones are up, but there's also one at the Museum of Comedy, and there's one at the they'll be up tomorrow. If you want to come along to any of those, we'll be talking about Road to Gilead stuff. And just sign up to the mailing list and you'll find out about those. We do need a feminist uprising right now. If we don't, I really fear we're going to get stripped of a lot of rights. Over time, it's not going to happen overnight. That's why I call it Road to Gilead, not Gilead tomorrow. But it starts somewhere. So if you'd like to join that grassroots movement, we would absolutely love to have you. Corinne, you have been absolutely wonderful. I'm so excited about your book. I've learned so much from your book. I think everyone should buy it. And it really does make a nice present for somebody for Christmas. If they get it signed from the author, it feels so much more personal than just, I bought you a book. And you say, oh, and I met the author and da-da-da-da-da, and I went to this event and I thought she was great. It's a really nice thing to have a personally signed book. So do consider them for Christmas presents, because also you're putting feminism under the tree. Or you may celebrate Hanukkah or Eid or something else. Don't limit yourself to Christmas. People got birthdays coming up and all of that sort of stuff. I really do mean that. I think it's such a nice thing. Whenever I get a signed book, signed to me, I think it's really, really lovely. And Corinne's come all this way from Philadelphia, so can we give her a big round of applause? And can we have a big round of applause for Seed Talks?
Yay! Woo!
Give Seed Talks a follow, because if you've enjoyed tonight, they'll definitely have other events that you'll enjoy just as much. So that's at Seed Talks. You can also follow Corinne Low, PhD, not lighting her heart. See, confidence, not us hiding our light under a bushel there. At the Guilty
Corinne
Feminist.
Low was taken.
Exactly. Give me a follow on DF Dubs if you like, or The Guilty Feminist. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you. This will come out as a podcast on The Guilty Feminist quite soon. If you'd like to listen to it, you'll hear your question back if you made one, or you laugh if you did one. It's been a really, really wonderful event, and I really just want to say a big round of applause again for Corinne and for you. Your good selves for coming. Thank you, Seed Talks. Thank you to everyone here at this great venue. Enjoy the book signing now, and hopefully see you again. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
You have been listening to The Guilty Feminist with me, Deborah Frances-White, and my very special guest, Corinne Low. The recording engineer was Grundy Lazimbra. The Guilty Feminist theme tune was composed by Mark Hodge. The producer was Tom Selinsky for The Spontaneity Shop. Thanks to Gina DCO, Zainab, Mohammed, Ned Sedgwick, and everyone at Seed Talks, as well as all of you for listening. For more information about this and other episodes, visit guiltyfeminist.com.